let's switch gears again. Let's talk a little bit about Legacy Fort Wayne, the light lease. Liz Brown had a news conference yesterday. What was your response to the news conference she had?
Well, kind of the same thing, and it's interesting because Councilwoman Brown has had several different positions on this. When she was running for office, she said that she thought there should be a committee that decided what happened with the light lease money. She has said at various times in office that she thought it should be used on economic development. She thinks it should be invested. She thinks it should be an endowment. And I have been very consistent about saying that, one, the light lease money needs to be used in a way that truly leaves a legacy. And I can't think of any better legacy than financial stability for the community. So the first chunk of it that exists right now, when the deal is approved by the state, that should be used for debt relief. Because when we pay off debt, then we free up cash on an annual basis. The CDIT fund, for example, the city gets about $23 million of CDIT revenues a year. 11 million of that goes back into debt service. So if we paid off those CDIT bonds, we would have $11 million a year more in cash to do the projects that we think are important. I just think that too many times we're making decisions that seem to be tied more to instant gratification. And the citizens of Fort Wayne, when they paid off 24% of their consumer credit debt, they were saying that they understand that instant gratification isn't always the best path. And I think it's time that city government got the memo on that.
Are we moving too quickly on this issue?
On light lease?
On light lease funds?
It's interesting because we've known for 40 years that we were going to have a trust available at this point in time. So I think that we've come pretty late to the conversation. I think that if the mayor, the current mayor, decides to spend the money, then that is moving too quickly. The fact that they're rushing through this committee process, I don't know how seriously they're really taking it. They had the Feedback Fort Wayne website up, and now they're completely ignoring all those suggestions, and they formed a committee to talk about it. So are they going to pay attention to what the committee says to them? I don't know. It's interesting. I think that question will be answered when we see if they take seriously the recommendations.
There's the light lease fund. I don't know if it's called a committee or a commission that's made up.
Legacy Commission.
The trust fund.
Yes.
Is actually overseen by members of city council, some members of the administration. They've met the last couple of years as they're supposed to, but they don't elect officers like their bylaws say. There's several things that they don't really do in violation of their bylaws. Would that change with you?
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you're going to have regulations in place, you should follow them. If you're not going to follow the bylaws, then you need to address the validity of the organization. And there are times when bylaws need to be addressed, but I think certainly electing officers for a commission that's overseeing a $40 million trust fund seems to be fairly important. I think people sometimes get sloppy about how they implement policies, and that's when we get into trouble, frankly. You have to pay attention to the details. You have to make sure that you're doing things correctly. I mean, this is important. Not only is it a lot of money, but it's also about the future of the community. So, yeah, absolutely. If you're going to have boards and commissions, then you need to follow the bylaws that were established to support those organizations in the first place.
And one of the things that I think is important that your opponent brought out yesterday was the fact that we're not getting the $75 million that's talked about. We're not getting that all at once.
That's right.
We're going to come into maybe $38 million right off the bat, and then it'll be increments over annually.
That's right. And actually, it's not annual. The Henry administration structured it so that we're getting monthly payments.
Monthly.
And that fact was not correct in her announcement. We do have that, yes, there is, it's almost half now and half over the next 15 years is the way it's structured. So the part that's been building up over the last 40 years will become immediately available when the state approves the negotiated agreement between I&M and the city of Fort Wayne, when and if they approve it. I mean, because it is not necessarily a foregone conclusion. When the agreement is approved, there will also be a $5 million settlement given to the city, and then the rest of it is going to be paid out at an increment of $145,000 a month over the next 15 years. I think that's a terrible way to structure a deal, frankly. It seems to me that's what you do when you want the money to just kind of disappear into the annual fund, when you want it to be trickled away. I would not have done it that way. And I don't think that it's to the best advantage of the city to have been structured that way, but it's the deal that was struck, so we are now stuck with it. So the these two things, you've got the first half, you've got the second half. Even if we used the amount immediately available, we could free up annual resources. If we paid off the debt, we would free up cash on an annual basis, and then you start moving the cash that we had been using to pay down other debt to start paying off more and more loans. I mean, imagine that. Imagine if the city could become debt-free. It would be a tremendous thing. There are people all over the country recognizing the importance of financial freedom. I would love to be able to make the phone call to say, hey, we're debt-free. We are completely free and clear now, and we can make cash-based decisions that are going to benefit the future of our community.
Anything else we'd like to talk about today?
One thing that's tied to this that that I was thinking about just the other day, this whole idea of cash-based government. Not only did we see it work very effectively in the county, but having cash available is what enabled the county to invest $5 million into land banking, which is truly establishing land, making it available for future economic development growth. A lot of folks don't realize the county did that on a cash basis. We didn't borrow money to do that, and we did it on a cash basis because we had been very conservative about how we budgeted through the prior 7 years. And what a tremendous story for government to be able to make decisions on a cash basis. That's when you really are making sound policy decisions. So I've seen it work. That's why I'm so passionate about it, because I've done it, I know it can work, and I know that it can transform the city of Fort Wayne. We just want the chance to do that.
And speaking of land banking, since you opened the door,
yes,
is that something that you'd like to see implemented maybe for downtown Fort Wayne or incorporated area?
There's been conversation about whether or not we should do some land banking downtown. I actually have found that in the downtown area, we have property owners that are generally fairly agreeable to negotiations. There are some outstanding examples of when that hasn't been the case, particularly in the purchases for the Harrison Square project. But I am hesitant to do that because there is such an active private sector. One of the reasons we did land banking on the county side was the goal was to have ultimately a 1,000-acre parcel that could be developed into an industrial park. But when government invests in the infrastructure to serve industry, running transportation infrastructure, streets, running sewer infrastructure, water infrastructure, utility infrastructures. Now, government spends a lot of money on that kind of behind the scenes and underground infrastructure. We have been bitten by that before. The county invested nearly $1 million in that kind of infrastructure out across from GM and what has now become the Silverado office park, and they didn't own the property before they made that investment. So the property was privately owned, and the county invested $1 million in making the property more valuable, and all of a sudden, and wisely, the private sector property owner said, hey, my farm is worth a lot more money now. And they started charging what were unreasonable rates for the land there, which made the infrastructure investment less valuable because companies didn't want to pay the rates on the land to live in that area. So they got it kind of backwards. The reason I'm going down that path is you don't have that situation downtown. It's not, I mean, yes, we need to make some infrastructure investments, but that's tied to the combined sewer overflow system, and that's community-wide. It's not going to change the value of the property. So it's a different scenario.
Okay. Anything else, Paula?
That's it. Thank you very much.
We appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you.